My name is Fernando Serra. I'm pleased to be here with Professor Abell and Jorge Carvalho from HSM. Professor Abell is a well-known academic and executive in education. He's a former president of IMD and also the founder of European School of Management in Berlin. So, Professor Abell, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me.
And if you could please tell us something or your ideas about the future of strategy and marketing in the new world, in the new role of those, we may say, disciplines and for the managers and the CEOs and the people.
Good. So, thank you for this good question. I think, if you ask anyone about the future, nobody knows. But what I think clever people do is they look at the past and see if there's some kind of a thread that's running from past to present to future, and this way you can get a bit ahead of others in thinking. So I think none of us are clairvoyant, but it's probably important to see kind of how things have been developing and to try to see them before others. So I think if you want me to ask the question, what will strategy be like in the future, I have to start a little bit with the question what it was like before and why it might be changing and what might happen later. It's an old story, strategy. I mean, it's nothing new. We were talking about strategy hundreds of years ago, and probably some of the original thoughts didn't come from business, although business people from the beginning were trying to set directions, but some of the early ideas about strategy came from military, and when we really started to think seriously about strategy, it was probably after the Second World War. I mean, business people practiced it, but it became part of the literature of management really after the Second World War. And if I think about that time, everything was growing, and because we were all recovering from a bad time, and the main point there was to get the strategy right. And if you got it right and multiplied it, you could do very well. You didn't have to change it much. You had to get it right once, and then whatever market you were in, you could grow by simply expanding it. And we went on like that more or less for 20 years, as long as everything was going up. The main point was to have a good strategy and just do it. So implement it and multiply it. And so we really started to think differently about strategy when some companies realized that they were not in one market with one business, they were in several markets, because as the world expanded, companies diversified and they went into markets beyond their home market, even in the United States. We started to think about things outside the United States. And for the first time, people started to say, we don't need one strategy, we need more than one. We're diversified, we're decentralized, so we need decentralized strategies. We have several. And then for the first time, we started to hear the word business unit strategies, because companies were in multiple businesses. And then we separated corporate strategy, meaning something for the whole company, from strategies for one business and another strategy for another. This was the first really big change, and it only really happened when companies recognized their separation structurally. So we had business units, and so this was a big change. A second big change occurred, I'm deliberately describing the history to talk about the future, but the second big change occurred when, and I remember this, I was living in the United States, you could get money quite easily if you had a good project. So the banks were open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you had a good thing, you could get money. And companies hadn't borrowed so much, so that if they had good projects, they went to the bank and borrowed money and did it. And then we came to a point, another big change, money was not in universal supply everywhere, anytime. And some companies started to realize that if they wanted to fund one of these business units, they had to de-invest in some other business. I mean, it was like you had a sort of a portfolio. You had to make choices. This business can grow and needs money, And this business is perhaps rather cash rich and could provide the money. And that was a huge change, because before that we thought of every business would grow and every business would kind of be on its own steam strategically. And so the idea of a portfolio and the idea of some businesses being investment businesses and other businesses being kind of cash cow, that was the second big change that occurred. And then I think the third big change that occurred was the kind of beginnings of real internationalization, and the words international strategy started to get into the literature and into the thinking. And so these things, the lesson we can draw from all this is that strategy has never been one thing, it's a moving target. If we learn something, one thing about strategy is it probably won't look tomorrow quite like it looks today. And these things have been continuing to accelerate. I think one thing that's now really different is that technology has played a huge role in the development of new products and new markets. And so a lot of companies start to think that strategy is somehow related to the technology dimension, not only. And so we hear a lot about technology strategy, and do we have the right technologies to compete in different markets? Actually, some people are deceived by that, because they begin to believe that all strategy originates in the R&D lab, and that's also not correct, because some of the new things and opportunities for differentiation have to do not with products, but to do with design. Look at, iPads and iPods, and why are these things so popular? Not just because they're new, technically new devices, they're slick. They look good, they feel good. And this has nothing much to do with technology, it's to do with design. And a lot of companies' strategies are not depending on technology, but on services. So now strategy starts to be not just kind of get good products with good technology, well designed, but our strategy has to include a service dimension. And so
designing in a broader way also.
It's really, it's kind of the strategy for various elements which could be combined in new ways for customer satisfaction. And customer satisfaction is ultimately, that's the purpose of strategy making. If you ask me now about the future, I would say one thing that is a constant, that there are 3 or 4 things that are really important and continue to be important about strategy. If you say, what is a good strategy? It's certainly about setting the goals of the business relative to the goals of other businesses that could use or supply the cash. That's an ongoing constant. And it's even more important because we don't have 3 or 4 divisions, we have multiple bits and pieces of companies, each of which have different roles in the, so this is one. A second dimension, and I was writing a book about this also, maybe it's 20 years ago now, the way you define the business, the scope of the business, continues to be a very important and somewhat neglected subject. But actually some companies win because they define the business from the beginning differently than others. One of the new dimensions which will continue to evolve in the future is not just the definition in terms of customers and what we do for customers, but how we define ourselves vertically. Where do we compete in this business chain? And the way it seems to be working is that many companies are outsourcing some of the things that they used to own, preferring to get out of the fixed costs and to compete actually by orchestrating what others do, not necessarily owning it all. We're going to see more of that because as we globalize, you see that the business chain is being supplied from one corner of the world for one part of the system and from another corner of the world. So this complexity of supply chains, much more diversified. Many people, when they say international, think it's about markets, but it's equally about supply. The best companies in the world are looking for the best people, and they don't care whether they come from Thailand or the middle of Africa or from Brazil. They're looking for the best wherever it is. And strategy is more and more about finding out where the leverage points are in the world. And they're not all in the United States of America anymore, by any means. There's amazing things happening in parts of the world we could never imagine. And the people are doing things which are on the leading edge, and we didn't even know it was happening. And then suddenly we get a big surprise. So that's, I think, something that's really something to keep an eye on in the future. Not imagining that everything good is from the West, the best comes from the West. That's really dumb today. You have to look and see where great things are happening, and not, for the whole business, but wonderful things are happening which can affect your business. And that's really new. And I think another dimension which is new is we are now beginning to believe that entrepreneurship, initiative taking, is really where people are going to win and lose so strategy, yes, but I think companies are looking for people who take initiative like entrepreneurs. They act like entrepreneurs in the corporation. And entrepreneurs are renowned for not being great planners, not worrying too much about resources. They find opportunities more than worry about resources. So in the corporate world, we thought that strategy was about kind of understanding what you were good at and what resources you have and then trying to use it. Entrepreneurs teach us that it's the other way around. If you can identify the opportunities before anyone else, you can get to the market quicker and you can find the resources, find the money, find the technology somewhere to get the job done. So we actually sort of, as we move forward now, strategy is moving away from a concern for resources and competencies to a bigger and bigger concern for identifying opportunities before someone else and being quick and being entrepreneurial. And we're looking in companies for people who can move things, change things. These are just some of the things that strike me.
And how do you find those opportunities? Is that a framework where companies should work at to really tackle those opportunities?
No, I tell you what I think. If you watch entrepreneurs, the reason that they nose out good opportunities is they're everywhere. They're kind of energy bombs. The real entrepreneurs of the world are all over the place all the time. They talk to a lot of people. They involve themselves in all kinds of things. They read a lot. They think a lot. They run around and they spend a lot of energy. And in this process of being very active in a lot of places, they find opportunities automatically. In the corporate world, if you go into some companies and you see that people go in their offices in the morning and turn on the computer and sit in front of the screen all day and shut the office and they hardly have a contact with anyone, this will never lead to the identification of opportunities. The entrepreneurs live a totally different lifestyle. So we've got to get more people in the companies out where the action is, running around, thinking, not just in their business corner, but thinking about other kinds of human activities. The entrepreneurs are doing all kinds of things. They learn, get new ideas, they go to concerts, they go to football games, they read books, watch the television, turn on this and that, and mostly they're with a lot of interesting people. So we've got sort of a very internal-looking, heavy corporate world, which is not. It's not a matter of, there's no scheme for finding opportunities, it's the way you live, the way you behave. And I think that we see a huge difference between the energy level of entrepreneurs and the passion for something, and they kind of get turned on because they get some crazy new idea, and they don't all work out, but if one doesn't work out, they find another one. In the corporate world, if something doesn't work out, we tend to put the door closed and say that's bad luck, you didn't make it. Entrepreneurs, we have a word in German, it's Stehaufmenschen. It's this little sort of, this plastic thing that if you put it down, it comes back up again because there's a weight in the base.
Do you think that has to do with the fact that failure in business is bad, something that is looked as a bad thing, as opposed to in entrepreneurship where failure is something that you embrace?
I think some corporations are not quite so blind, and they allow people to try a few things, and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. But some entrepreneurs really fail big time and still get up again. And I think it's difficult to do that in the corporate world. People are more tending to keep their heads down, not to risk too much, because they're supposed to perform and get results, and, they don't kind of rush forward with quite the same passion. I think perhaps the word passion is also very important in this story of strategy. If you ask me about the future of strategy, I would say it's going to be more passionate, and we will not have good strategies unless we have people behind them who have passion to actually do what they say they will do in their strategic plans. That's probably the companies who can get people engaged and can harness these passionate people who will then, mobilize others in the team to do something. That's something. I don't think strategy can be made by consultants, for example. It may be we went through a period when we needed a lot of analytical skill, competitive analysis and more marketing data and financial planning, and so we know how to do that now. And the missing part is you've done all that and you've got everything on a plan and nobody's doing anything. And the new strategy will come a bit the other way. Someone with passion will convince someone else that this is a great thing to do. They will have the data, the backup, but the main thing is the passion. And we'll see more of that, only because it doesn't work unless you have that. That's one of, I call that kind of the want to do, not just the can do and the could do, but the wants to do. And probably, because you asked me earlier, the other dimension is the should do. We're in a world where the word should. We've understood finally that not everything is just business, business, business. The business of business is not just business. Business has an important role to play in the development of our societies, in the development of people, and good strategies will be a result of not just can do or could do, but also someone has a passion to do it, and it's something that's important to do for the society as a whole. This is not really new, but it's not a dominant theme, especially in the last 20 years. We've kind of forgotten. Some entrepreneurs 50 years ago were thinking like this already. Said we're in business to make a contribution. We're not only in business to make a profit. In fact, if we make a contribution, we'll make a profit.
And that has to do with the fact that sustainability right now is really something that has to be within the strategy
I think the word sustainability has two very distinct meanings, and we get a bit mixed up, but there's the word sustainability in an environmental, ecological sense, and of course that's important, but some of these problems are very deep and business can't solve all of them. So, and there's another word, sustainability, which means you want your company to be sustainable, meaning not just here today and gone tomorrow, but doing things progressively so that you stay on top of things, not just this year and 3 years or 5 years from now, but over a long period you continue to grow and prosper. And that's not an environmental idea of sustainability, it's a business idea. And I think a lot of companies have been going the other way. They've been concentrating on kind of short-term results and not even thinking about the long-term, yet alone about long-term sustainable growth and profit. And I think that's coming back also.